Today, the Prime Minister gave an insight into his thinking with Chris Kenny here on Sky News, and schools look like really one of the key points here. But nothing's going to change anytime soon when it comes to being able to freely move around our society like we did a few months ago. And I think the Prime Minister picked the perfect metaphor for, despite the fact that cases are lower than they have ever been, despite the fact that there are so few people compared to the rest of the world in things like ICU units, now is not the time just to undo it all.
It's a bit like when people say, well, if you haven't had any boats arrive in Australia, then why do you keep running a border protection regime? And of course, we've had many who've tried, but that's been an effective regime. Equally, we spend billions and have for many, many years when it comes to protecting Australians from terrorists, and we've been able to thwart many terrorist attacks, 16. But that means you've got to keep your vigilance. I mean, this virus has the potential to do great damage to the health of Australians.
Excellent. It didn't start by accident in terms of how it got into the country, and also the way that we have kicked the curve's backside has also not happened by accident. The truth is, we will have to wait, we will have to see, it'll take this long period of time, but there is going to be a way back, and I'll get to a couple of examples about how they're going to start to think about this, about what to do with new cases when they appear. That might mean we're going to get to a scenario that when a case appears, we all don't lock down. Instead, there's a way to move those people into something other than a hospital. I'll get to that in a second. But the Prime Minister is absolutely clear about education. He copped it from all of the people who were the millionaire doomsday preppers who wanted to pull their kids out of private school at minute one. Well, he, of course, knows that there are an awful lot of people who don't have the option, who aren't great when it comes to homeschooling, and kids' education will suffer. So he believes, like I do, that we have to have schools go back to normal as soon as possible. The threat does not exist to kids that some people feared it did a few weeks ago, and it certainly doesn't when it comes to teachers getting it from kids. Here again is the Prime Minister on education with Chris Kenny tonight on Sky News.
I've said it many times. This virus is going to take a lot of things from us. I do not want it to take a year of a child's education, precious years for these children. And, if online and distance learning was a better way of delivering education, then that's what we'd do all the time. We wouldn't have schools. We wouldn't have all of that infrastructure and all of these sorts of things. Of course, teaching in the classroom, teaching face-to-face, teaching in that environment with kids together is a positive environment for children to learn.
Agree completely. Now, of course, I have particular skin in the game. My little girl only started school this year. Her experience has been one term, a big chunk of which has been spent at home and distance learning. She was only starting to get into the swing of the fundamentals of what it takes to go to school, how to learn, how to interact with that school system. And as hard as my wife and I are trying, we obviously can't do the same job that any school would be able to do. So yes, from that perspective, I come each and every night. But Australia's education system has gone back every single year for 10 years, when billions and billions of dollars were spent on it. What's going to happen with the many, many weeks and potentially many, many weeks more that parents choose to keep their kids out of school, and schools send messages that basically, unless you absolutely really have to, please keep the kids away? We have to be finding a way to get schools back, because this means that some of the childcare issues, and I know that school is not about childcare, but the issues of where the kids go during the day is a direct correlation to whether somebody is able to do their job or not. We have to deal with this much sooner rather than later. To me, the priorities of what is the next few steps is it's about kids going back to school, it's about bread and circuses in things like footy, but also it's about making sure that we could make sure that as many people can go back to work to start to create demand back in the economy. We need to do this as fast as possible. We also need to make sure that elective surgery starts to flow again from as early as next week. The hospital system has dealt with this crisis. That didn't happen by accident. But also, keeping people away from medical treatment that they desperately need is pointless at this point in time. We can make this decision day by day, week by week, so people don't have to suffer while we keep beds empty around the country for the just in case.